Hi, next up we have Dr. Stockler from UBC in Canada, who's going to talk about outcome measures on both the patient and caregiver perspective.
Okay, thank you for having me here. I will talk about something that will become more and more important as we're getting more and more, hopefully more and more treatments for rare diseases and particularly for GM1 gangliosidosis. And I'm going to talk about our research in outcome selection, and I will particularly focus on patient and caregiver perspectives. So this is my the title of my talk. Most of the work actually was not done by me. It was done by Maria Bleier, Sarah Nasseri, and Jasmine Lai, and I'm here to represent them all and at the same time to thank them for the hard work they have been doing. So the goals of my presentation are first to describe the meaning of something that we're calling now core outcome set, to explain the significance of core outcome sets for the evaluation of therapies in rare diseases, to describe who the stakeholders in the creation of core outcome sets are, and then, of course, to explain our projects, literature review that we did, and focus groups in which I think some of you who are present here participated, to show you first results, to compare with what we see in the literature, and then finally next steps. So what is a core outcome set? First of all, what are outcomes? It's unusual if we're just talking about clinical presentations, but outcomes are actually observable or measurable signs or symptoms or impacts of a disease. The term outcomes is particularly used to assess treatment effectiveness. So if you look at clinical trial protocols, you will always see that term outcome. And what is a cause and why is it used? Cause is a standardized set of a limited number of disease-specific outcomes which are prioritized by stakeholders like physicians and parents to guide consistent trial reporting. And the purpose of the cause is really to ensure that trial outcomes reflect shared priorities. So, cause in trials for rare diseases, why do we need them? First of all, there are inconsistencies in outcome selection between the trials. So if you have more than one trial for a condition, it's often difficult to compare really between the trials. So how are differences of the outcomes in between the trial? And sometimes the outcomes are just too ambitious. We all know that some treatments don't meet FDA approval because they just don't achieve the chosen primary outcomes. That sometimes the outcomes do not reflect real-world experience, which becomes very important in the marketing phase, where we have to do post-marketing observations. And as I mentioned already, trials are often not very well comparable in between each other. And also, there's often something missing what matters to patients, and this is called patient meaningful outcomes. So is it really meaningful for a patient that you have an improvement in your MRI, or is it more meaningful that you have improvement in your abilities to talk or to handle objects with your hands? And the solution is actually to create an agreed-upon standardized set of those codes, which should be in the future a minimum requirement for clinical trials. So each clinical trial could contain this set of core outcomes. Of course, together with other outcomes that the researchers choose, but just to make sure that there is a core that is comparable in the future. So when it comes to create those core outcome sets, who are the stakeholders? Individuals who are diagnosed with the disease, like GM1 gangliosidosis, and parents and caregivers of a person who are diagnosed with this condition, because some of our patients cannot talk for themselves, and healthcare professional, allied health professional, researchers, but also decision makers who have to decide finally whether a treatment is effective. So the aims of our study that is currently ongoing is to develop a core outcome set for the evaluation of the efficacy of interventions for trials for GM1 gangliosidosis, and we are mainly focusing on later onset forms, on type 2 and type 3, so juvenile and adult forms. And what we want to do is to create a list of outcomes that include both patient and parent, caregiver meaningful and medically important outcomes, to finalize a candidate list of these outcomes, and then to do a prioritization of outcomes through consensus methods like Delphi survey and consensus meeting, and then of course to share our findings widely so that people know about it and can include our findings in the design of their trial. And the first step is that we're sharing our findings here, and also of course appreciate that some of you participated in this study. So this is the timeline of our project. The first thing in creating these core outcome sets is the so-called evidence review, and the evidence review consists of two steps, namely, first of all, to see what's around in the literature, so to do formal literature reviews, and also to listen to parents and caregivers and to do focus groups to identify patient-meaningful outcomes. I mentioned we need to publish those findings, and that's where we are currently. So for the literature review, there are some methods that provide us with some guidance to do it in a formalized way, and we did that all. So first of all, you do some formal literature research. You have to register your study in an open science framework, and then there are some softwares with which you can screen all your records and extract all your outcomes. And the whole thing is really backed up by COMET, which is an initiative that helps clinicians and researchers to create these core outcome sets. And it's not only for rare diseases, but it's also for more frequent diseases. So now let's come to our focus groups. So one part of this evidence finding process is to find out what patients who are affected and their caregivers think what would be important for them. And we did virtual audio recorded focus groups, which were transcribed, and in those focus groups we asked a few predetermined questions. Then there is a whole process of generating, of transcribing the focus groups and to generate themes, and we use the method that's called reflexive thematic analysis, which helps us not only to identify those outcomes in the focus groups that we, for example, as physicians would like to see or hear or that we understand easily, but that also shows what parents say beyond that. So these were the questions that we asked. So the main question was, what do you think are important outcomes that should be measured as part of a treatment study for individuals with with GM1 gangliosidosis and more Cure B disease. So I have here more Cure B disease because, as you will see at the end in my acknowledgements, our study is funded by the Priest, a family fund, which is actually a fund to support research about more Cure B disease, which is a very rare presentation of GM1 gangliosidosis. Sorry? 5 minutes. Okay. From your perspective as a parent or caregiver, what are the biggest challenges that your child faces? For caregivers only, we ask them what from the perspective of your child, are the biggest challenges they face. What do you want to see happen as an outcome of treatment? What are your concerns or worries about a drug trial? And are there outcomes that you feel are so ideal that they never could be achieved? So here, just briefly, the results of the literature review. I just want to focus on those Type II and Type III literature review that we have finalized. And you can see that there was quite a lot of individuals reported in the literature review, and that we found about 130 outcomes. The results of the literature review I just want to show you because there is a difference what you will then see from the focus group. So in the literature review, medical outcomes were of course very prominent. So there were lots of speaking about skeletal and problems and movement disorder, also about biomarkers like urine and plasma markers and a brain MRI. But there was really very little, if you look down, lower than 10, about sleep, about social abilities, and about pain, which is something that we know even as physicians are very important in the course of a patient. In the focus groups, we had 3 focus groups that included 9 participants. They were about 2.5 hours long, and people participated from almost all over the world. And here you can see that we also had some participants that were able to participate themselves, and otherwise it was caregivers. And the age of our participants, of the individuals for whom our participants cared, was about 9 to 18 years, so an older age group. And here you see the results of the focus group. So very prominent emotional functioning, mitigation of progression was very often mentioned, physical functioning, and pain. And other outcomes that we have from the literature review were not even mentioned. So that shows you how important it is to have those patient and parent-reported outcomes as well. So results from the focus groups, and if you then look at all the outcomes that we found and group them into teams, there were a couple of themes that were prevalent: competent and comprehensive care. The other one was stability as a success. So people didn't even expect an improvement, but they would already be very grateful if there was stability of the disease, if there was less pain, if the living in uncertainty would become better. People often don't know what will be the next step in the progression of my child. Another theme is that caregivers experience that their concerns are often dismissed and disbeliefs, and that the voice of the person themselves who is receiving the treatment is often not heard. If we look at the comparative analysis, you can see that there is a difference between the focus groups that we did here and the focus groups that were published, also with Cure GM1, but which was with younger patients, so therefore the outcomes are a bit different. When we look at the comparison between our medical literature review and the focus group, you can see Here, this is the medical literature. So the outcome from the medical literature were really different from what we saw in the focus groups. But of course, there was also some overlap. Again, showing how important it is to have both the medical information and the information from the patients. What's next? So we will do next a consensus a process where we want to make sure that we find the most important outcomes among all the ones that I showed you with Delphi survey and then finally with consensus meeting. Significance of our studies, of course, to establish a global platform to share GM1 experiences and to empower patients through impactful research. In terms of research, to emphasize patient-family roles in identifying outcomes, and for healthcare also to develop measures for treatment and care practices, and in all the steps to include patients. Thank you very much. That was it. This is my acknowledgement. Our sincere thanks to the patients and caregivers whose participation and contributions were essential in this study, from Cure GM1, and of course the Priest Family Fund who gave us the funding for this project.